Hi everyone, this is Dr. Antonelli back for part 2 of our topic 7 PowerPoint, personal, social, and moral development. If you recall and you watched hopefully already the personal development piece, that was part 1, then we talked about the big ideas. We talked about the case study and things related to the case study. And then we began our discussion of personal development with some of the statements related to personal development, as well as what teachers can do to foster it. Okay, that was all in part 1. If you missed it, you need to go back and check out part 1's lecture. Part 2 is now going to focus on social development and peer relationships, basically. And the next few slides kind of talk about statements, give statements related to both childhood and adolescence that have to do with the social development of your students. So first piece is to think about peer relationships. Peer relationships are extremely important. They promote personal and social development in such a way that makes it really different than when an adult interacts with a child or has a relationship adult child. A lot of times, peers share things that they would not share with an adult, let's just say, or even if you watch children interacting, it's a very different kind of interaction than with an adult and a child. So this is a really big piece because development gets promoted in a different way between peers than it does between adult and a child. So that's important to remember. Another piece to remember about social development is that peers often come up with their own definitions of what's appropriate and what's not when it comes to behavior. This relates to the whole idea of peer pressure, and peer pressure, as we well know, impacts tremendously what students do in their behaviors, what's acceptable, what's appropriate, what's not, and the greatest effects of these appropriate or inappropriate ways of behaving that peers come up with happens in junior high school. So any of you out there who are thinking of becoming middle school teachers, this is why in class we had talked about how that's really a tumultuous time because of this piece where peers are actually kind of identifying what are appropriate ways and not, even if that's not what adults think. Okay, so that's often an interesting piece to remember here with peer pressure. Another piece to remember for social development has to do with the interactions between boys and girls and each other. And there's distinct differences between these interactions. For example, boys are often thought to interact in larger groups and have more risk-taking kind of behaviors and rough and tumble kinds of behaviors. Girls tend to have more affiliations where they kind of affiliate with just certain other girls, and they often, with those girls that they would consider part of their peer group, they would be a bit more cooperative and almost exhibit a greater kind of sensitivity to things and kind of look out for, each other. If someone's upset, they kind of try to talk them through it or say, why are you upset, or those kinds of things. Social groups during adolescence become super duper important, and there are 4 types of groups with categories and titles. The first one is called a clique. I'm sure you've heard of some of these, but didn't maybe know the exact definitions. A clique is basically a group of about 3 to 10 people. It's kind of moderately stable as a friendship group, meaning the people in these groups are friends, and they often don't change. They're very stable in how they continue over time. Okay. A second type of social group is called a crowd, and this is a larger group than, let's say, the clique. It's not as tight knit as a clique. It kind of takes on different categories, such as those that we call brains, quote unquote brains, or jocks, and that's what we would be considered a crowd. A subculture is the third type of social group, and that has to do with crowds from the second type that tend to resist what the majority culture kind of says is, acceptable in the way to do things. They kind of form their own culture as a result. And the fourth social group is known as a gang. This category is very cohesive group that often has an initiation rite for you to become a member of. They have specific colors that are associated with them, as well as symbols, and they have they're very territorial as to what spot in, let's say, the community is where they belong and no one else belongs, kind of thing. So just keep that in mind for the 4 types of social groups. Another piece to keep in mind for social development, and specifically peer relationships, has to do with romantic relationships. These are really super important in adolescence because they provide some practice for future relationships in adulthood. In addition, they have some benefits because having romantic relationships enhances a student's ability to work on social skills as well as their interpersonal behaviors. Remember, interpersonal, when we talked about interpersonal intelligence, we talked about someone being able to work well in groups. So an interpersonal behavior is how one communicates, forms relationships with others, interacts. So these are things that definitely need to be worked on, and having a romantic relationship during adolescence provides kind of an outlet for doing that, okay? But there is a wide variation in how these skills are kind of promoted in relationships. So it's something to keep in mind. Another piece to social development and peer relationships has to do with popularity. There's a few categories of popularity, and when we talk about truly popular children, they have very good social skills, and there are 4 types of children who we think of as having good social skills or not. The first one is a popular child, where people want to do things with that person all the time. Everybody wants to be with them, right? And then there's rejected children, which are the least preferred social companions, meaning nobody wants to be with them, okay? And then there's controversial children, where some people like these children, other people do not like these children. That's what makes them controversial. And then sometimes it could even flip, where ones that we used to like, now we don't like. They kind of evoke some feelings in those around them that make them kind of iffy from day to day as to if we're going to like them or not. And then the 4th type of popularity is called neglected, where people have no feelings either way about this particular group of children. They're kind of just there. So it's not like we really like them or we really dislike them, okay? They're just there. We really don't have any feelings about them, okay? So those are 4 categories of popularity. Another piece to social development has to do with a term called social cognition. I want you to think back to one of the other topics we did. You remember the term metacognition? And we said metacognition was thinking about thinking. Well, social cognition, similarly, is students thinking not about thinking, but about other people and how they socially interact. That's why the word social is in front of cognition instead of meta. So I just want to make a comparison there for you, because I know you remember what metacognition was, okay? As children get older, they're better able to kind of think of what someone else is thinking and feeling. This is known as perspective taking, where you could say, oh, I see what you're saying, or I can really understand how you feel, okay? There's another term called theory of mind, where we can actually understand what someone's mental state is and what they're going through. That increases over time. We become more aware of what people are, what's going on in their minds. And then another term, recursive thinking, is related here because it's what you are thinking other people are thinking of you, okay? So you could look at someone and say, oh, I know what you're thinking, I know what you're thinking, that kind of thing, and how they're possibly viewing you. Now, sometimes that gets skewed a bit, right? When people have misperceptions about what someone else is thinking of them. So that's something to keep in mind. But again, this develops over time, okay? In addition, we have to remember that children process information in a way that sometimes influences how they behave toward others, in good ways and in bad ways. So we remember information processing we talked about in one of the other topics so far this semester. Well, how someone actually goes through that processing will kind of result in a behavior that is a good behavior or a not so good behavior. So we have to keep that in mind. Aggressive behaviors are those not so good behaviors because they result from processing something in a negative way. So when students are processing information, they're not doing it positively. It's not kind of being efficiently done, and negativity kind of creeps into the way they do that, and therefore aggressive behaviors result. There's a couple of kinds of aggression. That's physical aggression, which is quite simply physical aggression, or there's relational aggression, which is the teasing and emotional kind of aggression. Then we have proactive aggression, which really is very deliberate. Someone goes after someone, whether it's physically or relationally. That's, for example, the person known as the bully. And then there's reactive aggression, where that's a response to some aggression that's coming your way. Okay, so you would react to it. So again, just some terminology to recognize, and all of these are clearly related to interpersonal development and social development and peer relationships. Okay, what can teachers do to encourage social development? Extremely important as a classroom teacher. We want to encourage students in our classes to take the ideas of others and kind of look at it and empathize with it and say, I understand, or yeah, I could see your point of view. Okay, directly teaching social skills to students who have trouble interacting effectively. So it's, if a student is having trouble, asking for something to borrow, let's say, from another student instead of just taking it, we would directly teach that social skill of how do we go about asking for something that we want from someone else. Okay, constantly providing numerous opportunities is big, okay, because instead of just leaving them unstructured, we still need to have unstructured social interactions, but providing group work and using group work in the classroom will promote cooperation and this positive social interaction. Talk with students, of course, about dangers of internet communications. Obviously, this is a topic that has evolved very quickly over the last number of years because of online cyberbullying and bullying. Okay, so it's another thing to address with students. Explain, of course, what bullying is. Again, this is huge in schools today with the new HIB, harassment, intimidation, and bullying legislation. Schools have lots of policies in their handbooks about this, and teachers have to do their part in promoting instruction in this area as well. Of course, as a teacher, you need to be alert for things related to bullying that are happening, incidences of bullying, forms of aggression, and then of course take appropriate actions. Again, you will have the help of your school handbook and school policy on this one because schools have very well laid out and detailed plans related to this. In addition, you should always be promoting understanding in your classes, having students respect others and understand their viewpoints, always make positive comments. If you think about in college, if you've worked on our online system, of course, when you do discussion boards, a lot of the netiquette, we call it, is where we address a person in a positive way. Even if we disagree with them, we do it in such a way that it is respectful, and we communicate, where we might see a difference, but we still respect their other person's viewpoint. So again, this is a big piece for teachers to do, okay? This moral development piece, we're going to start in part 3 of my lecture, so just wanted to bring that up. Come back for part 3 on moral development. See you later, bye.